I'm now going to say something that will astonish you.
Ich bin ein Berliner.
Nein, niemals!
I have a dream.
Mr. Gorbachev, tear down this wall.
We are living in an increasingly polarized world.
My administration has accomplished more than almost any administration.
We must begin now.
Welcome to the Bulletin podcast.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to a new season of the Bulletin podcast. This is your producer, Hussein Al-Mallah, and here's what's coming up.
So every time you have a photo or a picture of the same person, the system will compare them and try to realize if they are the same. Only because technology is built on mathematical grounds and therefore is neutral, it can lead humans to mistakes and to faults.
Hello everyone, my name is Carolina Reis and I am a first-year student of the Brandt School.
And my name is Caroline von Stein, also a first-year student at the Brandt School.
And we welcome you to the Bulletin podcast. This is our third episode of the year and the second part of our mini-series of data privacy.
In February, we talked to Dr. Bukhari, a lecturer at the Brandt School, about all things privacy in the era of social media. And this month, we are pivoting and talking about the use of facial recognition technologies, specifically used by law enforcement agencies, and the risks this brings to our data privacy.
To help us unpack this topic, we have invited an alumna of the Brandt School and someone who shares our names, Carolina Reis. Carolina is a Brazilian attorney specialized in digital rights and democracy. She holds a Master in Public Policy from the Brandt School and a Bachelor of Laws from the Federal University of Bahia, Brazil. Before joining the Brandt School, she worked with policy advising, democratic participation, and human rights. And her thesis focused on how Brazil is regulating data privacy now that law enforcement is increasing using facial recognition technologies.
Lots of things surprised me in our conversation. So if you want to learn more about the link between Carnival and facial recognition technologies, how our human biases make the technologies more dangerous, and how to defend yourself from landing in a police facial database, then keep listening.
Carolina, thank you so much for being with us here today.
Your thesis focuses on facial recognition technologies, specifically in Brazil, and the implications on data protection laws. I found your thesis really fascinating, and before we get into the nitty-gritty, I wanted to know what sparked your interest in the issue initially.
Yes, sure. Thank you, Carolina, for having me here. It's a pleasure to make this interview for the Bulletin. And regarding your question, it's really funny because when I was working at the government of my hometown, I started to deal with issues regarding technology and digital policies. And then when I started the master here in Germany, I thought that I could write something about these issues like democracy and digital policies. And then I was looking for a topic for my thesis. And this topic about facial recognition was a trending one in Brazil because as many people may know, Brazil is really famous for Carnival. And the first time that facial recognition was used successfully in Brazil was in Carnival, that they could really find someone using the technology. So I thought, okay, I'll just have the opportunity to write about something that is really trending and in a context related to the best part in the world, or at least the one that I love, which is Carnival. So it was a good excuse to start writing.
I wouldn't have thought your thesis all started with Carnival.
It's such a Brazilian stereotype, I would say.
So I think for many of us, facial recognition technologies conjure images of a big brother like surveillance state. But what is the reality? How are law enforcement agencies currently using facial recognition technologies, and what are the risks of deploying such technologies?
um, I think to understand this question, I don't know how many of our listeners are used to this technology, this facial recognition technology. So first, let me briefly explain how it works. It's just like you take first a picture of your face, and then the system just gets some points of your face and make from them a template. So every time you have a photo or a picture of the same person, the system will compare them and try to realize if they are the same people. And regarding the use of facial recognition and in law enforcement, it's really interesting because we are not in this big brother reality yet, and I hope we will never get there. But there are many uses of the technology in law enforcement. So the most famous one, I would say, is in real time using cameras in CCTV, and so closed circuit television. But some of them use also body worn cameras with the technology embedded on them, and also smartphone cameras and apps to make this recognition in real time. But some of them also use the footage that they record to make in the future. I mean, they record something now, and in the future they just use the technology on this footage to try to recognize some people. They can also use pictures or videos gathered from social media. There are already researches that show that they use also composite sketch um, and also altered pictures. It means sometimes the picture is not good enough for the system to read them, so they alter some stuff to make it readable, so to say. And it's interesting because the first thing that people may think about it is just like they would use only police watch lists. It means only people they are looking for, but since the police or law enforcement agencies are not using this in a really accountable way, it's a bit hard to find out which databases they use. But it's already clear that many of them don't use only police watch lists. They also use driver licenses databases, social media, as I have already said, and other non-criminal databases. It means, from your question, you said that about the risks, and the most clear and the first one that people think is about false positive. It means when a person is misidentified. It means the system says that this person is A, but in fact the person is B. In this thing, when you put in the context of law enforcement, can have a lot of costs and a lot of risks for the person who was misidentified. For example, this person could be approached violently or not in the better way. Sometimes this evidence can be used in a trial. And also this picture, if of the identification, if it can be stored and can be used in the future for other investigations as well. So the first thing is this false positive risk. And it happens quite a lot because facial recognition technologies, they are not really are not yet really accurate. Sometimes, as many researchers showed, they have a lot of bias, especially related to race and gender. So the numbers of people rightly recognized in white men are way more higher than to Black women, for example. Another risk is related to the biometric nature of the data which is collected, because your face is hard to change. It's not every day that you make an operation on your nose or that you make something to really change your face. So it means if the technology is really advanced, every time that you put a picture or you're in front of a camera with facial recognition, it will recognize you. And in a context of law enforcement, it can, on one hand, be really helpful to find people whom they are looking for, but on the other, it can it just put the burden to society, because if you know that you have been observed or that you are observed, you're gonna change your behavior. So it's good because criminal behaviors can be avoided, but it's bad because legal activities may be held because of this approach of facial recognition. So you have loss of privacy in public spaces, for example. You have what is called a chilling effect, which is not wanting to exercise civil liberties and rights like assemblage and expression. And then you have also a movement that try to puzzle the facial recognition. So you have some researchers who created like algorithms to modify the pictures. So if you take a picture and you pass through these algorithms, they would modify the picture so the facial recognition technology cannot read it anymore. So it's helpful when you're posting something on social media, for example. And some people, especially when they're going to demonstrations or protests, they just paint their faces so they can avoid being recognized, for example. But can you imagine people just going with painted faces all the time on the streets? I mean, it sounds a bit ridiculous and it's not socially accepted. So it's the point of having the burden on society and not really on law enforcement. And the one point which make it even worse is what called data aggregation, and it means like you have the data of the face of someone. Then you just connect this data of this face data to the name of the person, and then to the address, and then you just connect to another database, which is drive license. Then you know that person can drive. Then you connect to social media. Then if you get connecting and linking, at some point you will know, for example, Caroline, that you have been in a party last week, just running your face on a facial recognition system. So this data aggregation related to this linking, this endless linking, is called function creep, and it has a huge impact on privacy and data protection. And finally, there is also risk of cyber attacks and security. So maybe if you have all these databases connected and you have a breach, what can happen? Some criminals can have the data of the whole population, including the face that you cannot change so easily, and all the data to make I don't know, maybe something really unexpected or really, really bad. And inside the security risks, we also have what Lynch from the electronic frontier calls as insider threat. So it means that sometimes the agents, the staff of law enforcement can use this information to find something not related to law enforcement. So I don't know, maybe you are a policewoman, Caroline, and then you just, okay, I suspect that my boyfriend is just getting out with another person. So let's check here if I can find some information or if I can use the cameras on the streets to find out where he's going. So there are a lot of risks in this use of facial recognition in law enforcement that we have to take into account when we deploy it.
Yeah, wow. That's a lot of risks, and there's a lot to unpack just within everything you mentioned. I found it fascinating to learn that there are new technologies altering the pixels so that your image can't be taken online and used for these law enforcement purposes, which I found really interesting. I wanted to go back to one of the risks you mentioned about our own human biases infiltrating into these new AI technologies. Um, which is complicated by something you call technical neutrality, or I mean, it's a common term that you mentioned in your thesis. Could you explain what technical neutrality is and how it fits into the discussion on facial recognition?
Yes, sure. Techno neutrality in this context is the idea that since technology is built on mathematical grounds, and those mathematical grounds would follow explainable steps, this technology would not have bias, or their outputs would be really understandable and predictable, and everyone would know what happens when you scan a face on this facial recognition system, for example. But we have to take into account that technology are human and social constructions. It means that bias can come in a lot of ways through different levels. It can come from, for example, from the mathematical code that they use. It can come through the databases that they use to train the algorithms, for example. Um, it can come um, it can come at the end when you have the decision. I mean, because you have to, when law enforcement agencies use facial recognition technology, they just run a picture and they receive 5 or 6 pictures of similar persons. So they have to decide which one is more similar to the one on the picture or on the footage and connect it with other proofs that they have. So bias can come from a lot from many different levels, and this idea that only because technology is built on mathematical grounds um, and therefore is neutral, it can lead humans to mistakes and to flaws. So that's the point.
Yeah, and I know, at least in the U.S., this discussion on technical neutrality has and human biases has led a lot of states, at least in for example, California, to ban the use of facial recognition technologies in law enforcement agencies. And you yourself actually recommend Brazil to implement a moratorium on these technologies before um, proper data protection regulations can be put into place. Um, and then also the European Commission recently considered a ban for up to 5 years on the use of facial recognition technologies in the EU, but in the end, it never came to fruition, this ban. So I'm wondering, what are the challenges of passing such bans? Maybe your experience that you've seen in Brazil, or things that you're following in Europe.
Mm-hmm. from my research, what I found is just like this debate on public security always follows a similar way, I would say. It's always about having the all resources to provide security to people. So it doesn't matter if the tool I'm using to provide or to increase the sensation of security, it doesn't matter if it just hurt other rights or other liberties. What matters is just like that I'm trying to fight the criminality. It's the main statement that the authorities in Brazil make, for example. So it's hard to find for a ban or for a moratorium when you have when you always have the positive results published. So, for example, when I said about the carnival, for the listeners who don't have an idea, in Brazil, carnival is really big. So you can imagine that every day it's a 7-day party, and you have every day thousands and thousands of people just passing on the streets and just celebrating carnival. Can you imagine that you just scan, I don't know, 10,000 faces to catch one person that was in a police watch list? I mean, 10,000 faces every day for 7 days, 7,000 persons whose faces were scanned, and you only could find one person. But what they say is just like, they don't publish that they have scanned 70,000 faces. They just say that they could find this one person, and therefore the technology is good for law enforcement. So this is one point. They say that the technology really works. And the second point is that they start to deploy the technology without notice. It's something that happens really often in Brazil. Suddenly they just say that the police department of the state A is using facial recognition. And when people start to look for information and try to find how it's working, they don't provide any information or any really transparent information, and they are just using this without any previous debate with the society. So it's also related to what is called normalizing technology, in the sense like they are already using. Sometimes they find people, sometimes this technology is useful for law enforcement purposes. So why would we fight against it? Some civil society organizations, they have some outcries. Sometimes these outcries work, sometimes they don't work. As I said, California is a really interesting example. And you mentioned that the European Union said that this maybe the approach to facial recognition was to ban. It was at the beginning of 2020, but then it doesn't go further. It didn't go further actually. But 1 week ago, the European Commission just published a draft regulation on artificial intelligence, and interestingly, they just came not with a ban, but they propose to restrict really hard the use of facial recognition, not only in law enforcement, but in other contexts as well. So I think that the barriers to get a ban or to get a moratorium is more related to this normalizing and this debate of, yeah, it's working, so why would we change it? But at the same time, civil society organizations are trying to get this ban or to get these regulations. And in this balance, it's sometimes the pendulum goes to one side, sometimes to the other side.
Yeah, and these discussions are still ongoing and developing day by day as countries navigate the new challenges of protecting their citizens' data. So it'll be interesting to see how the use of facial recognition technologies develops in the next few years, and I'm sure you'll be keeping up with that. So thank you so much for coming and speaking with me today. This was really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you, the Bulletin podcast. It was my pleasure to be here.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow, that's really interesting. A lot of information to reflect on it.
Definitely. Do you know if law enforcement uses facial recognition in Chile?
Not at the moment. It is a discussion that is just started in Chile. It is very late in the subject. We do not have a law for data protection, for example.
Yeah, from our discussion earlier this year, that seems to be the case for many countries. What strikes me most is that the same uncertainties exist when it comes to regulating other kinds of new technologies like social media or self-driving cars.
Yeah, that's true. Nowadays, more regulation should be imposed regarding the social media and the new tech. But for sure, that will change rapidly in the next 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, that's the hope. Okay, so that's it for us today. We don't have any announcements for this month, so we just hope everyone has a successful start to classes, and we send our thoughts to all the second-year students who have started their master's theses. You have to say thank you.
Oh, thank you!